Hey friends, I'm Sean Pierce Johnson and welcome to this week's Little Lesson. Today's subject is something that I think a lot of us take for granted, the major scale. All music theory, or at least the stuff related to pitches, scales, modes, and the like, is all rooted from the major scale. You can't have minor without major. You can't have mixolydian without major. And having a foundational understanding of the major scale in and of itself is going to further help you understand the basics of music theory and the more advanced concepts. And the best place to start getting a little bit of a primer on the major scale is the home, C major. Now, why exactly did I refer to C major as home? Well, that's because C major in and of itself is sort of the center of music theory and Western music in general, because all the tones in that scale, all the notes that is, have no sharps or no flats. They're all natural tones. That basically means that we don't raise or lower the pitch by a half step. We start with our root note, the 1 of the scale, which is, of course, C. Moving up a whole step, we get to our 2, which is D. Another whole step up in pitch brings us to E, which is our major 3rd. And then we reach our perfect intervals, which are the same whether you're playing in major or minor. More on that later. The perfect 4th is going to be F. The perfect 5th is going to be G. We reach our major 6th here, which is going to be A. We work up a whole step to B, which is our major 7th, and then finally we reach the octave, another C. But those notes exist every other place on the guitar, and all you have to do, knowing now that there are no sharps and no flats, is just find C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C all over the guitar neck. Let's just pick a random spot. How about we go for C right here at the 10th fret on the D string. So if we start there, we can now look for our next D. Now that happens in a couple different spots near that, but I'm gonna kind of work backwards down the neck rather than up the neck. So we're gonna find D. Well, the closest one sort of behind where I'm starting is this D right here, which is the 7th fret of the G string. So C, D, now E, which is just up another whole step. So right there, we have our 1, 2, 3. Then our perfect 4th, F, is gonna be actually right underneath that, and that's F. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we need to find our G, which is going to be our perfect 5th. And that is right here. 8th fret of the B string. Now we need to find A, which is just up another whole step. Now we need to go to B, which is going to be our major 7th. 7th fret of the high E string, and then a half step from there up to C. But if you ever find yourself not being able to necessarily think in terms of the letter names of the notes, which I would encourage you to work on, by the way, you can actually find a formula to figure out a major scale. And it's actually very, very simple. And it's especially handy to figure it out on guitar. Let's stick with a single string for this example. We'll start with that 5th string root. The C is at the 3rd fret of the A string. So we go up a whole step to our 2, which is D. From there, our 3rd is E. We go up another whole step. Now our perfect 4th is a half step above that. Remember, we're going for natural tones here, and E to F is only a half step. From F to G is another whole step. From G to A is another whole step. From A to B is another whole step. And then from B to C is a half step. This whole half whole half formula can now be used to find the major scale in any musical key that you can possibly think of. Now, everything that we've looked at so far is just single notes within the scale, the tones of the scale. But within those scales are chords made up of those scale tones that correspond with that given key. So going back to C major for a second. Within C major, or any given major key, you're usually going to find 3 major chords you can play, 3 minor chords you can play, and 1 diminished chord that you can play, and that will then give you the tonality and the home of C major, or whatever your root note for whatever music you're making is. So with C major in mind, we can start off with C major. Now, the other major chords that we can play are on our 4th and 5th scale degree. So our 4th of C is F, so we can play F major. And our 5th is G, so we can play G major. Now, all that was fine and dandy, but maybe we want to add a little bit of that minor spice. Well, those chords can be found on the 2nd, 3rd, and 6th scale degrees of the major scale. So whereas we started with C major, we go to our 2 and get D minor. Then we have our 3rd, which is going to bring us to E minor. And then finally, our 6th scale degree is A, so that gives us A minor. Now, you may have noticed we've neglected to mention the 7th, because the 7th is the diminished chord within the scale. Now, diminished chords, we don't necessarily play those all the time because, well, they're characterized by what is often referred to as the devil's interval, the tritone, a diminished 5th. So if we want to figure out what that diminished chord is, well, let's have some fun with it. It would be B diminished, since B is our 7th scale degree. Now, usually what I do when I want to interject a diminished tonality into the chord is I'll oftentimes just play a triad, which in and of itself is sort of a broken down version of a chord. And I'll just start with a root note 5th string power chord, and then drop the root note. So instead of playing C within that power chord, I'll drop it down a half step to the major 7th, but keep the perfect 5th. So now let's recap what we talked about today. The major scale. It is the foundation of all Western music, be it rock, pop, whatever. Music has to start somewhere, and it starts at the major scale. The scale is made up of 7 degrees. The root, the tonic, 1, major 2nd, major 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, major 6th, major 7th, and finally the octave, 8. And any of these notes can be found anywhere on the guitar, and you can find them easily with the whole half formula. And lastly are the chords of any major key. 3 major, 3 minor, and 1 diminished. They can be arranged however you think sounds good, and you can build then leads, solos, or melodies on top of them to start creating music. Now, honestly, I feel like we just scratched the surface with this video, which was the point. But if there's anything else about the major scale that you want to know, or if you have a question about any other guitar playing concept, let me know what it is in the comments section down below. I'm going to do my best to get back to each and every one of you. And hey, you may never know, your question may inspire next week's little lesson. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of your day with me and watching this week's little lesson. I really hope you got something out of it, and if you did and want to see more, make sure you click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell because they go up every single Wednesday. But if you're looking for something that's a bit more intensive, check out my Busy Guitarist Bootcamp at the link in the description box down below. It's going to be a 10-week live online guitar camp where we expand on this and much more in a series of 1-hour group lessons together. And if you sign up today, you get 50% off the full price. Until we see each other again, my friends, I'm Sean Pierce Johnson, wishing you all watching great tone and happy stomping. Cheers, friends. God bless.